Okay, so we're gonna tonight. Our topic is, what did we publicize? Anyone remember?
Yosef, something about talking.
Something about talking. So I thought it would be nice to title it. It really is. We're going to talk about the power of words, the power of speech, the power of letters. But a nice title would be, so how often do you talk to yourself? Before we begin, we'll just do an introduction. Today is Hey Tevis. We know today is the day that we, about Chassidim world over, we celebrate the victory of the Svarim, which occurred in Tafshin Mem Zayin in 1986. And the background of that the Rabbi explained of that victory was not just a victory of a court case, which seemingly should be left within the family. Family feuds should be left in the family, should not be brought out to the public. But this was brought out to the public because in truth it was a very public, it had implications for the Chassidim. And the implications that the Rebbe explained is that basically the opposition was claiming that a Rebbe is a personal family individual just like any one of us. And therefore, you have a tzaddik, you have a leader, and you have his family, you have his chassidim, and just like normal people have families that they inherit to, so too, a Rebbe has a family whom he inherits to. And the chassidim are not really his family. That the connection in the chassid and the Rebbe is not really like a father and a son. And what came out of that ruling was really remarkable. That what the judge said was basically that the Rebbe Rayatz, his entire existence was about the Chassidim, for the Chassidim. Therefore, his library was in essence the property of the Chassidim, of the good of Chassidei Chabad. The Rebbe didn't claim it as his personal asset. The whole point is that it doesn't receive the status, the category of an inheritance. But Yochanan stated that this shows that this was similar to Yitzchak with Al-Teba writes that the Goyim, that even the Goyim were able to announce that the Tayras HaChassidus is permitted according to law and it's not against the government, may be publicized. In other words, that even the Goyim had giving permission for spreading Chassidus is a new step in Afat Samayans. So what the Yochanan mentioned is that the fact that, based on what the Rebbe said, that they proclaimed in the verdict that the Svarim belonged to the Chassidim, which was, from a legal perspective, the family had the upper hand, and not the Rebbe, not the Chassidim, because he passes away, they have children who are the rightful heirs. There's nothing you can do about it. That's common law in countries. They had to prove a new status quo, which is called the concept of a Rebbe, that a Rebbe is different. That's why they actually, in the testimonies that were called up, they had to ask people from Europe, what exists between a chassid and a Rebbe? How does it work? What is a Rebbe? What is this concept? Very interesting. And so this is the first thing that came out. The Rebbe said that it symbolizes the hiskashros, the idea of the chassid and the chassid to the Rebbe. The second thing the Rebbe mentioned is of the need for people to honor the Sfarim. The Rebbe said that the Sfarim were not very happy sitting in the bookshelf. And they started complaining and kvetching. And that kvetch turned into that upstairs in Shemayim, there was a gzeira, there was a decree taken away and sold. Anyways, they're not being learned. So at least make some money. That's what the Yetzer Hara said. And the Rebbe explained this, that the Svarim themselves were demanding, they were demanding their justice. And the justice is not just, in other words, the finger is not just to be pointed at those who mistakenly and under misguidance stole the Svarim, but as well to those who didn't learn the Svarim and caused in Shemayim this whole kitruk to happen. Therefore, the Rebbe said that the real Dida Natzach is when we open the books and we learn the books and we use the books. Not just to undust it when we clean for Pesach, to actually learn them and open them. And so the Rebbe asked for people to buy books on Didon Natzach, on Hey Tavis, and to make books available for sale for a discounted price. So I'll announce again, we have 40% off for 24 hours on the set.
24 bucks.
24 bucks, all 24.
But we also have smaller sets for sale. The Shabbos set and the Yosef set are also sale. 30% off.
And these books fall right in line with the Sikha that was said in Tafshin Memches. In Tafshin Mes that the Rebbe said when he talked about people buying Svarim, he then said that in the Svarim that people should buy are Svarim of Halacha that they will need to use or that they will use day to day to know what to do in life as a Jew. Okay. That was
a question. It's not related. It's not related, but it just came. All the shiurim that we learn, right? Let's say there's all day we're listening to class, listen to your halacha class that you send out. If we don't, the whole point of learning is using the mouth. I mean, not the whole point, but I mean making it into a practical mitzvah that we say the words and we do something. But if we're listening to a shiur, we don't do any of that. Is that?
So it's a great question, and I don't know why you chose the question, but it's really what we're talking about tonight. We're here to talk about speech. So that's the not real answer. The real answer is that if you ever come to my classes, you'll see people talk a lot.
Yeah, I know.
They're not just listening.
No, I don't mean that, but I'm saying we don't repeat what the written text.
We don't
I know.
express the story.
Right. So I just wanted to make a joke. I thought it was funny. The real answer to you is that the Alter Rebbe already addresses this in Hilchos Talmud Torah, in which he writes over there. I believe it's in Perek Daled, but it's there. It doesn't matter right now. It's there. Okay. He writes that although it is a mitzvah deraisa v'dibar tobam to verbalize the words of Torah to fulfill the mitzvah deraisa of Talmud Torah, nonetheless, when you are hearing it from a live person, meaning not a live person on the screen, but from a live person, live, you see the person, you hear his physical voice, then one who hears is like what he was saying. So whenever you're listening to a shiur by anybody, it is literally as if you are saying those words. If it's live, meaning you hear his actual voice. Anyone listening through the internet, no offense, but you don't get that.
If you learn by sight reading, not verbalizing the words that you learn.
If what? No, sight reading. What you mean by sight reading is not verbalizing the words in your mind. No, the mitzvah deraisa is to verbalize. We're going to discuss tonight. That's part of tonight's topic.
To move your lips or to make
part of tonight's topic. Is this a coincidence that we're asking this tonight? So we want to know the topic before we start the topic. Okay. Let's begin. Again, our topic for all those tuning in, we're going to discuss tonight the power of words, the power of speech, the power of letters, and how something that is so powerful that God has blessed us all with, we sometimes or often don't know that we can actually make much better use of it to help us in our Vayigash Hashem, help us in relationships, help us deal with issues, personal issues of emotions, and just totally change the game of the ammunition we have to help ourselves and improve. And that's what we're going to be learning tonight is the power of speech. We talk a lot about changing in Chassidus and a lot about how we have to work on our midas. This is going to be one of the very, very practical applications of something you can start doing that actually assists and help a person reach the goals that they would like to reach and whatever they want, as we will see. So it all connects with this week's Parsha, as we will see how later on. You see, there were two brothers who had a meeting, but they did not know they were brothers. Yehuda did not know that Yosef, the viceroy of Paran, was his brother. Yosef, of course, knew. And I know we read this last year in the video, and even though I'm sure everybody remembers everything we said, I really like the Medrash, so I'm going to repeat it again. It's really exciting, the fight that went on and the arguments, and it's going to be our opening statement for understanding where we're going to be leading to of the idea of speech. So we're reading now in Medrash Tanchuma. The Chumash itself leaves out the gory details. It just basically states that Yehuda pleaded to Yosef, the viceroy, please, this isn't right what's going on. We didn't ask, we just came here to buy food. You accused us right away. You asked to bring the brother. We brought our brother. Now you took him. I'm much greater than him and everything, much more powerful. Please take him instead. That's basically the glimpse we get from the Chumash, and then Yosef is already about to burst in tears, wants to reveal himself, and he reveals himself. Medrash Tanchuma. Vayigash elav Yehuda. The Medrash Tanchuma begins a whole episode that is quite interesting of what really happened between those two during those quite volatile moments. Nigash b'teichachis. Yehuda was coming for a confrontation. He wasn't coming here to plead on his knees. He was coming for a fight. Be Adoni, please my master. Al Tavalin Midas Adin Yadaba Nosh Avdcha Dava Bazna Adin Vayolim Fnelding. Masha Yadaba Achas Gashkarak. Yehuda came on the one end, he was talking tough, on the other hand, he was talking soft. He was using both strategies. You are just like Paroi, the pasuk says. What was the continuation of that sentence as the Medrash Tanchuma? The continuation was as follows. You are like Paroi, your master, who kidnaps women from their husbands, remember? Mm-hmm. And so too, you, however, have a fond for the same gender. You saw Binyamin, who was beautiful, and now you desired him. So he'd be your slave. Alternatively, just like Paroi is the leader in your country, so too we are the leader in our country. And then it begins the dialogue. Says Yehuda to the viceroy. My master, the viceroy, you asked your servants, Amalai, but you already began with false accusations. How many people came from how many countries to Mitzrayim to buy food, and you didn't ask them one question? You didn't ask anything. Were we asking to marry your daughter or marry your sister that you have to start interrogating us? But we answered you. We didn't speak back. We gave you the answer because we have nothing to hide. Yosef then said to Yehuda, why are you the leader of speaking in front of all your brothers? Who put you as the spokesman? I see in my cup, my special cup, that there are brothers much older than you, and you are one of the small ones. In fact, let's see 1 second. So he answered, Amalai, Yehuda said back to him, what you are seeing me acting as the spokesman is because I entered as a guarantor, as we read in the previous week's Parshas. He guaranteed his father that if Binyamin wouldn't come back, he wouldn't get a chiluk in this world and the next world. That's why he's involved. Amalai, Yehuda said, Yosef said back to him, so tell me, Yehuda, why didn't you become a guarantor when they came to sell your brother to the Ishmaelites for 20 silver coins, and you caused tremendous pain and anguish to your old father, and you told him that Yosef was eaten up, and he didn't sin and do anything to you. And him you didn't defend, says Yosef to Yehuda. And now suddenly this Ganav, Binyamin, who steals my goblet, then now suddenly for him you're sticking up. Go tell your father that the bucket follows the rope. It's translation. I'm not sure exactly what he meant by that, but the bucket follows the rope. I guess it's a saying like, what goes around comes around. I don't know. Hachevel achar hadili. I'm sorry, the rope follows the bucket. The opposite. The rope follows the bucket.
But this is how they took water out of the well with the rope. Yeah, tied to the bucket.
Right. Then the bucket follows the rope.
Right.
Here we're saying the rope follows the.
No, you told it backwards.
Okay, anyways. Kivin Shashama Yehuda. Since Yehuda heard this, can you just imagine Yehuda hearing this? He doesn't know who's Yosef. He just heard all the dirty laundry, all the details that you can only read in the tabloids. He heard everything as if this individual, Yosef, this viceroy, was there when it happened. He was shocked. When Yehuda heard this, he screamed and he gave a big cry, a bitter cry. He said, "How can I go to my father and Naraneni iti v'nafshe kshura b'nafshe," as the pasuk says. So the Medrash is adding in all the in-betweens here. Yosef said back to him, let's debate each other, let's argue. He told Yehuda, go ahead, spread open your claim. Immediately Yehuda said to Naphtali, go run around Egypt and tell me how many marketplaces it has. Naphtali jumped and returned and said, only 12. Yehuda said to his brothers, I will destroy 3 of them, the rest of you take out 1, and we won't leave 1 man left in Egypt. Amar loy echav Yehuda. And his brother said to Yehuda, Egypt is not like Shechem. If you destroy Egypt, you'll destroy the entire world. At that moment, Yosef was unable to withhold himself. Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachman. Shmuel bar Nachman stated that Yosef entered himself to a great danger. As if he would have been killed, nobody would have known that it was him. It continues. Yehuda said to Yosef, in the beginning you told us that we were spies. Afterwards you said that we came to spy the land. Then you said that we stole your cups, your goblet. I swear on the life of my father the tzaddik, and you swear on the life of Paro the Rasha. If I take out my sword from its sheath, I will fill the entire Egypt with corpses. Said Yosef back, if you take your sword out of its sheath, I will wrap it around your neck. Amar le Yehuda, if I open my mouth, I can swallow you whole. Amar le Yosef, Yosef said back, if you open your mouth, I can stop it up with a stone. Brings us back to kindergarten days, huh? Amar Yehuda le Yosef. Yehuda said to Yosef, what will I tell my father? Amar le, go tell your father, Achevo heilich achar hadli. Yehuda said back, Din shekar d'donesani, you are judging us a false judgment. This is tremendous injustice. Says Yehuda to the viceroy. And the viceroy responds, there was no greater lie and injustice than what you did to your brother Yosef in selling him. So don't be one to talk. Yehuda then said, the fire of Shechem is burning in my heart. I feel like destroying Egypt. And Yosef said, the fire of Tamar, your daughter-in-law, is all that I see.
Wow.
Yehuda then said, I am very angry and you better believe me. And Yosef said back, your anger I can destroy. Amar le Yehuda, now I will go out and with one finger I will fill all the marketplaces in Egypt with blood. And Yosef then said back to him, you were painters all your days and that's what you continue to be. You were painters when you painted the garment of your brother and brought it to your father and said that he was eaten by an animal. Since Yosef saw that they had decided and agreed to destroy the entire Egypt, Yosef said, it's better I let them know now and the whole Egypt shouldn't be destroyed. Yosef then said to them, didn't you tell me that this brother of yours is dead? Well, guess what, guys? Ani kanisiv, I purchased him as a slave. I will now call him for him to come to you. And he started calling, Yosef ben Yaakov, come to your brothers. And his brothers started looking all over the room. Come speak to your brothers who sold you. They were all looking around, and Yosef then said to them, where are you looking? I am Yosef, your brother. And immediately their souls left their bodies.
So I think that it's like a hachana, that the souls wouldn't leave their bodies.
But they did leave their bodies.
No,
It didn't work. Okay, so this is the exciting story that we read in the Medrash. And in Kabbalah, we find that the story of Yehuda and Yosef represents, and we spoke about this last year in last year's lecture on the Parshas of Vayigash, and we're not going to repeat that lecture, but we will mention the points that were discussed there, and that is that Yehuda and Yosef really represent two different forms of power that's represented in a monarchy and a kingship. And as we know, we discussed this last year in length, that in the monarchies that the Jewish people have had, there has only been two. One of them led by Judah, the monarchy of Yehuda, and the second led by Yosef, the monarchy of Yosef. So this initial meeting of Yehuda and Yosef was really a meeting between these two monarchies. There's something of power, of strength, represented by Yehuda, and there's something of strength represented by Yosef. At this point, Yosef had the upper hand, but as we see from the Medrash, it seems that Yehuda really had the upper hand. Yosef felt that it was going to be over if he didn't confess. They were going to destroy the whole Egypt. So in the end of the day, it seems that Yehuda, the monarchy of Yehuda, is what wins. And as we know, that David, Mashiach ben David, is the Mashiach and not Mashiach ben Yosef. The Alter Rebbe in Torah in this week's Parsha, he already begins dissecting the spiritual meaning and background and correspondence of Yehuda and Yosef and what they represent. And he brings regarding the difference that we find between the Mishkan and the Mikdash. The Mishkan, which was around in the times of Moshe, later on in Gilgal, Shiloh, etc. So in the beginning, it was made of skin, tapestries. It had wooden, cedar wood boards that upheld the tapestries, but it was mainly the walls and roofs were all made of animal skin. In the foundations of the world, this is known as the animal kingdom, as the level of Chaya. So it was the level of Chaya was on top and by the side. The level of Tzemeach was under it, the wood, and the level of Doimen, which is the floor, the earth, was the floor. It was an earth floor. However, by the Beis Hamikdash, by the Mishkan already that was established in Shiloh, and later on, of course, in the final resting place in Jerusalem, the Beis Hamikdash was the opposite. It was made of mainly stone. The walls were made of stone, and it was actually forbidden to have wood. You weren't allowed to have a revealed wood in the temple. And the Alter Rebbe asked the question, why do we have a difference of law regarding the materials between the Mishkan and the Beis Hamikdash? And what he explains in that Maimer, which is printed in our Likutei Torah Sefer of this week, Parshas Vayigash, is that here lies the secret between the difference between Yosef and Yehuda, the difference between what is higher has a lower root, and what is lower has a higher root. In other words, that the system, the way God created things in this world, is that those who seem lower in society, they are in truth rooted higher in society. Or as we see, a simple mashal, if we have a large building and we see that the building collapsed, and we see that there are stones at many distances away from the building, we know the more distant the stone is from the building, it's a sign that it fell from a higher spot. So the higher you are, the lower you go, or the farther you go. And the same idea here. And the author therefore explains. In this world, what contains more revealed advantages, more revealed tangible good than the other is the level of tzemeach. We find vegetation. We live off vegetation. It has life. Inanimate, doesn't do anything. It just stares at you all day. Doesn't move. And therefore, tzemeach, we seek advantage over daima, over the inanimate. However, in its root, inanimate, such as stone, in truth comes from a higher divine root than just vegetation. So even though vegetation has life, some sort of life, nonetheless, in its root, it's lower than stone. And since the Beis Hamikdash is built corresponding to the future, and in the future, those things that today are lower will be elevated to be higher. Therefore, already in the Beis Hamikdash, which is a reflection of the future, it was made of stone and not of animal skin or of wood, which is higher in this world, but from a lower root and will be lower in the world to come. So this is what the Alter Rebbe explains there in the Maimer. And the connection between Yosef and Yehuda is that Yosef represents Seimeach, vegetation, while Yehuda represents Doimen. Yehuda's Melashon Haidah, Maidim, which is a simple Kabbalah soul, simple thanks. It corresponds to Malchus, which is Doimen, which is inanimate. We're going to go into this a lot further later on. The Zohar, in the beginning of this week's Parsha, Parshas Vayigash, says a very strange statement. It says that from this episode of Yehuda coming to confront Yosef, we learn the halacha of smichas geula l'tefillah, the necessity of approximating redemption to prayer, which in halachic terminology really is interpreted as the halachic obligation for a person to approximate the start of Shemona Esrei to the conclusion of the blessing of Gal Yisrael by Shachris. In Shachris we finish Baruch Atah Hashem Gal Yisrael, and you have an obligation to immediately begin Shemona Esrei afterwards. So the Zohar says that from the confrontation, the meeting of Yosef and Yehuda, we learn this idea of the smichas geula l'tefillah, that geula needs to be approximated with tefillah. What on earth is the connection? Two people meeting each other, so therefore we say this teaches. You could have said that about Yosef and Yaakov. You could have said that there were many meetings that happened in the Torah. What suddenly happened here in this meeting? So first of all, this is already coming to reveal the same idea that the Alter Rebbe began in the Maimer. Yehuda on the outside was lower than Yosef. Right now he's under duress. He's the one being controlled by the viceroy, by the king. But in truth, within Yehuda there is a power that's very great that can eventually overcome Yosef, which is what happened in the story. When we compare, the Zohar is saying that until Shemona Esrei, that corresponds to Yosef, while Shemona Esrei corresponds to Yehuda. Smichas geula l'tefillah, saying geula, that Yehuda came to Yosef, Yehuda goes on Shemona Esrei, and that a person has to approximate is saying that geula, which is birchas kriya shema, that corresponds to Yosef, while Shemona Esrei corresponds to Yehuda. And as we know, Shemona Esrei is higher than Shema. On the one hand, in Shema, we know that it's said with greater excitement. We say Shema Yisrael, you can say it very loud. You have a pasuk there, V'ahavtas Hashem Elokecha. On Shema, it's said quietly. There's no expression really. It's said in a still form. And it could be felt that it's in Avodas Hashem is of a lower level than Shema. And many people who deal with Avodas Tefillah know that the feelings, it's kind of hard to keep up in Shemona Esrei as much as in Birchas Kriya Shema and Shema. In Birchas Kriya Shema, you're discussing the angels and all the greatness of God. And in Shemona Esrei, it's more basic request, which doesn't exactly excite the heart with passion. But nonetheless, just like there's a certain power found in Yehuda over Yosef, there's a certain advantage in Shemona Esrei over the remainder of the davening. There's a discussion in the Poskim and in the Mekubalim regarding how Shemona Esrei is to be recited. We're out loud. And we find three approaches. One approach is that Shemona Esrei is to be said so silently that you don't even hear your own voice. The second approach is that Shemona Esrei is to be said loud enough for your own ears to hear. And the third approach is that Shemona Esrei is to be said aloud. We're going to go through these three approaches. I'm going to read them inside. And after we go through them, we're going to begin to analyze the differences. The Gemara states the following: Hamashmiya koilu betfilase, hareze mikatne emuna. Someone who raises his voice in prayer. This is referring to Shemona Esrei. Usually in halachic and Talmudic work, whenever it says tefillah, it's not referring to davening in general, but specifically to Shemona Esrei. When he raises his voice in Shemona Esrei, hareze mikatne emuna. He's considered those who are of the group of disbelievers. Doesn't have strong trust in God or belief in God. As he makes it as if God has trouble hearing and needs a hearing aid. What'd you say? A little louder, please. Hashem doesn't need no hearing aid. He doesn't need a boost of the mic. So he's considered Mekatnei Emunah. And then it continues. When he raises his voice in davening, he's considered from the false prophets, of whom it says, the false prophets, they scream very loud, but they don't have anything to show. Okay, so that's the Gemara. This is I'm reading from the Torah. There are those who say, some opinions say that which the Gemara states that you shouldn't raise your voice, davening Shemona Esrei, requires it that it should be so silent that even your own ears do not hear it. Nonetheless, from our Gemara, from the Babylonian Talmud, we are only excluding raising the voice in Shemona Esrei loud enough for others to hear, and not excluding that you yourself should hear. So that's one approach. This approach, the first approach, says that even your own ears shouldn't be hearing you, is, aside from being an approach of some of the Paiskin, as we just read, is also the approach of the Zayar. The Zayar is of the opinion that Shemona Esrei is meant to be completely silent. This week's Parshas, Vayigash.
And that means you move your lips, but there's no sound?
Correct. Yeah. We'll read it from the Shlach Kaddish and how he comments on it. One who speaks very shallow in his davening causes his heart to concentrate. But one who raises his voice does not have concentration. In the Sefer Zayar Parshas Vayigash it says that when one davens Shemona Esrei, he's standing in front of God, he does not need to make his voice heard. And when he does make his voice heard, his voice is not heard upstairs.
Wow.
My timer, what's the reason? Okay. It gives here a Zoharic explanation behind it. Basically, the Shlah here learns from the Zayar HaKadosh that a person is not to make his voice heard when he davens, when he says Shemona Esrei. I'm going to read from the Alter Rebbe in the Shulchan Aruch how he writes this halacha. Listen to how he writes it. It's in chapter 101, halacha 2. Lo yispalu b'liboi levad el mechatech hadvarim b'svasav u'mashmiya la'aznav. A person should not, when he prays, should not just read the words in his mind, think the words, but rather should verbalize them with his lips. In addition, he adds, to verbalizing them with the lips, he also has to make it heard to his ears. Belachash albeit silently. That's referring to Shemini Esrei. So here we have the Alter Rebbe clearly ruling, and this is the ruling of the Paiskim. It's not a novelty of the Alter Rebbe. This is the Chaber rules, the Torah rules that we read, and this is the final psak of how we must follow as Yidden. That not only must it be verbalized, but it also has to be verbalized to the point that our own ears hear it. However, he is not to raise his voice. Here the Alter Rebbe adds, he's not to raise his voice to the point that someone who's standing outside his 4 cubits can hear him. As it says regarding Chana's prayer, from which is the source of Shemini Esrei, and a lot of laws of Shemini Esrei I learned from there, it says that only her lips were moving, the koila lo yishama, and her voice was not heard. So number 1, says the Alter Rebbe, that this is part of the geder of tefillah. Part of the definition of Shemini Esrei, of the laws of Shemini Esrei, of its bylaws, is that just like by Chana, her voice was not heard to others, so too we can't make our voice heard to others. Furthermore, as we read before, whoever makes his voice heard in the Shemini Esrei is considered those who don't have a lot of belief. As if God doesn't listen to you if you speak silently. We could apply this at homes, no? We hear you also when you speak silently. You don't have to scream.
So what does the Shla say? Sorry.
The Shla, he brings the Zohar and explains that the Zohar is saying that a person should not make it audible to his ears. Even to his own ears. If it's not even heard by his ears, it's not heard by anyone.
And that's kind of what's coming. Because kind of doesn't say
right, true. Okay, we can learn it that way. But the halacha l'maisa, as we just read, is that we take from Chana that no one else can hear, but you must be able to hear your own voice. The Chachamim Tiknu, the Alter then continues, and furthermore the sages established tefillah belachash legamri, meaning in addition to the problem of saying it very loud because it's as if you think God can't hear you, and in addition to the problem of saying it loud enough for people outside your 4 amos being able to hear you, then it's not considered like Shemini Esrei of Chana. We have an additional issue that the sages established, that it should be completely silent, that it's that it shouldn't be heard by anyone, even if he's within your 4 amos. In shul, when we daven Shemini Esrei, a lot of times people are in your space. We don't know how 4 amos areas that only we're there. So even people that are right next to you, it's said silent enough that they will not hear. But what's the reason the Chachamim made this decree? In other words, this is not clear from other places. It's the Chiddush of the Alter Rebbe. It's an Alter Rebbe. That what we learn from Chana, what we learn from the prohibition of saying it out loud, is only regarding people outside of your space. But someone's within your space. You're in my space. I'm not making it heard to you. You're eavesdropping. However, but that's not the conclusion. In the end, the Chachamim prohibited even that. Why? As since they are eavesdropping, if you went ahead and daven Shemini Esrei audibly enough for others in your space to hear, it would embarrass and shame those who are sinners. They confess their sins in davening. It's a customary, as the Alter himself records, that a person is to confess his sins in Shemini Esrei in Shema Kileinu. A person is to say, as the Arizal writes, Chatasi avisi pashati v'mashen yachid. I have sinned in 3 different ways of sinning, etc. And he's then to confess the daily sins. Last night I did this, yesterday I did, this morning I did this, just before davening I did this, in the middle of davening I did this. He confesses the sins. So if the general public would all daven Shemini Esrei in a way that's audible enough for people within the 4 amos to hear, then anyone who's confessing an embarrassing sin would suddenly not say it out loud. And people will begin thinking, I caught him. Why is he saying Shemini Esrei silently? He's got something juicy. To say. And then he'll listen in. He has to be said loud enough for the ear to hear. So the Chachamim were very worried. They were very into this, that it's forbidden for a person to publicize his sins. It's not the derech of a Baal Tshuva to suddenly start publicizing all the things he did. Only bein adam mechaver, bein adam memakim, it's not allowed to publicize. Once he's done tshuva, it's between him and God, it's put away. A person is not allowed to publicize his sins. So this is the reason why that Alter explains. They established that even to other people within your space, you can't make it heard. So bottom line is that it has to be extremely low, but still audible enough for your own ears to hear.
So also Rabbi decided that it's going to be Gomer Chatayim.
So people could? No, but he says that you're not allowed to hear. The opposite. He says that you're not allowed to say it loud enough.
He doesn't say silence.
No, he says like this. Outside the 4 amas, that already we learned from Chana you can't do. Inside the 4 amas, an additional takana of the sages was in place to prohibit those people from hearing.
But you have to go say it's like your ears can hear.
Only that your ears hear, yeah.
But your ears hear it because the extra neuroses.
It's a little tricky. It's to be.
I'm saying that I decided with
What?
Isn't it the place where you're supposed to go for other people?
Yeah, Shema Kalena, sure. You do a lot of things with Shema Kalena. The Alter then continues in Sif Gimel. It's not over here. Now, what about special case scenarios where there are reasons to daven Shemona Esrei aloud? Im eino yachol lechaven belachash. If a person is unable to concentrate if he davens Shemona Esrei of this low audibility, or if he could concentrate, but not as much quality as he would be doing if he davened out loud, it is permitted for him to raise his voice in order to increase in his concentration. Very interesting what we just read. Alter here says you're allowed to daven Shemona Esrei aloud for the sake of increasing your concentration. However, one condition, and I think we can learn a lesson in life from this condition. If you're davening on your own, you're not interrupting and causing distraction for other people. In other words, a very basic lesson in Derech Eretz. Don't be frum on other people's expense. Be frum on your own expense. You have a certain shita, you believe in a certain thing. Don't make the public suffer because of you. Better that you daven quietly and have less kavana than daven out loud and have more kavana but sabotage everyone else. It's a simple halacha, but that's the perspective of Judaism in general, where it's not just about us, we have to respect the public. However, in public, it's forbidden for one to raise his voice. Why? He becomes a distraction and a disturbance to the people there. There's nothing more annoying than the guy who's saying Shemona Esrei aloud while everybody's quiet. It's just like, it's unbelievable. There's like a special distraction angel that's appointed to make sure everybody hears him and everybody's machshava sarah suddenly get distracted. You know, many machshava sarah. So it's having this guy now. I have to think about what he's doing. You know. Anyways. Says the Alter here also something very amazing, another big lesson we learn. If the individual is unable to have concentration when he davens quietly, go home and daven there out loud. Leave the minyan and daven alone at home. Yispal b'beis havikel. And this, by the way, is the source of the minhag of Chassidim who don't always daven with the minyan. Many Chassidim never daven with the minyan, meaning many people don't daven with the minyan. In fact, I think most of the Jewish world don't daven with the minyan, unfortunately. What I mean to say is that they show up for the minyan, but then they daven b'yechidus. They daven on their own. They don't keep up with the minyan. They don't daven on pace with the minyan. And this was a huge complaint that the Misnagdim always had against the Chassidim. You're being mezalza, you are belittling the mitzvah of tefillah b'tzibur. Tefillah b'tzibur is daven with the minyan. What is this that everybody here is doing something else? Nobody. Alter Rebbe says the whole point of davening is kavana, is avodah shebelev, service of the heart. If the heart ain't with you and it'll only be with you in private, as then you can raise your voice and you can act out the davening and it'll help you, then go home and daven. And from here, this is the source in halacha. If anyone wants to know, for the minhag of Chassidim, that you can go to shul, listen to kadeshin, listen to kedusha, and then you go to the cheder sheni and daven, or go to your home, as the word in here is, and daven there aloud. And it's better you do that than to daven without concentration with the minyan. That's how important concentration is. This is not the Alter Rebbe's novelty. It's rooted already in previous poskim. He just records it loud.
Concentration means kavana?
Yep. Yeah. Okay, this is until here the Inyanenu. We then also have the third approach. And I'll summarize it at all three approaches again after I say the third approach. And that is that in the future, Asad Lavei, the Alter Rebbe writes in the end of the Maimer of this week's Torah are, just get it open here. Moment. Seems like we got lost. Okay, I don't see it right now. I'll just say, and I'll quote the context. The Alter Rebbe there explains at the end of the Maimer of Torah of this week's Parsha that in the future times, based on the Zohar, Tefillah Shemona Esrei will be said aloud. In a loud, even initially, everybody will be davening aloud. So we have here three approaches. The first approach, which is of the Zohar for now at times, and Pasuk mentioned in the Torah, Shemona Esrei is meant to be so silent that even you yourself don't hear. The second approach, no, it's meant to be said to the point that it's audible at least to your own ears, but not to anyone else's ears. But if for concentration purposes, it can be said out loud, in private. And the third, in the future, everybody will say it out loud. What's going on here with the play of the voice? Some say you say Shemona Esrei out loud, say it quietly. What is the meaning behind all of these discussions and disputes regarding Kel? So in this is hidden the power of words and the power of sound and the power of us hearing our statements and the effect it can have on our kavanah. We're going to go into, when we read inside from different sources, the relationship between emotion and voice, or emotion and language, emotion and words, and how they feed off each other. Emotion feeds to sound, feeds to voice, feeds to expression, while expression feeds to emotion. Before we do that, I want to just read a collection of letters of the Alter Rebbe, which emphasize the idea of davening in a loud voice. So as we already saw from the Shulchan Aruch, davening aloud, hakil ma'ira kavana, the sound, a person's voice arouses his concentration. That's the basis for the ruling that we said. If you can't concentrate by davening silently, you're allowed to daven Shemona Esrei aloud. So we see that that davening aloud helps with concentration. People think that Chassidim, we daven silently. We don't daven. We daven quietly to ourselves. It's only the other Chassidim, Polish Chassidim, who daven with all the excitement and the screaming, especially Karlin. We ever went to Karlin and Minyan. The real Karlin and Minyan you have in Tiveria, a very old Karlin shul there. They scream and down, top of their lungs. I was once by the minyan there, the Karlin minyan, and I don't know what happened. Maybe there was some kind of something happened and nobody was screaming. And I was kind of worried. Is it like something changed in the shul? What happened there? And all of a sudden, in the middle of Sukkot Zimmer, one guy in back of me started screaming. I jumped out of my seat because it was sudden, the scream. It wasn't like, it didn't give you a chance to get used to it, And then everybody started together in chorus. And I remember there was a minyan at 6 o'clock in the morning, a Karlin minyan in a certain town. And I asked what time they started. They started 6 and they finished 6:30. It's like half an hour. How do you daven so quick in a half hour? I thought Karlin davens that night. I says, yeah, they daven out loud fast. They daven very fast out loud. In any event, but it was customary. It is customary, remains customary of many Chassidim to daven out loud. And we're not referring to Shemoneh Esrei, we're referring to the other parts of davening. They say a story of, I don't know if it's true or not true, but when Ben Gurion was deliberating whether to give religious Jews or Haredi Jews an exemption from enlistment into the army. So the members of Knesset of the Haredi parties told him that, listen, they're almost shagoyim. What are you going to bring them into the army? They're nuts. And they brought one of his top generals to visit some shuls, and he brought him to the Karlin shul in Mea Shearim. And he went there for 1 million, and he immediately signed on the exemption for all the soldiers. I don't know if the story is a joke or if it's true, but it's definitely been told many times. It's been told enough times to become true. Put it that way. So let's read some letters of the Alter Rebbe. What do you women think? Is the Alter Rebbe of the opinion that people should daven Sukkot Zimmer out loud, with loud and excitement, or is that off the Chabad derech? The Chabad derech is to daven silently, b'tznius, modesty, not to make yourself known.
But you could hear yourself?
Yeah, of course. If it's Shemoneh Esrei, you have to hear yourself. What do you women here think? What do you think?
I think from my experience in Denver, Colorado, which I attended every day, it was common level. That was my experience with Rabbi Engel.
When you say level, do you mean not too loud?
Not loud. And
if you were recording it, the line would be almost in the middle.
I think
maybe a little bump.
This was my.
Okay, but what do you think should be done according to the Chabad derech?
I think they probably should daven aloud because you're asking a question.
Until I ask the question.
No.
Okay, so let's see. And if somebody would daven out loud, everything, what would you say? He's picking up from other groups. So let's see what the Alter Rebbe has to say. Now, I think we can all agree the Alter Rebbe was a Lubavitcher.
He was more excitable, I think. He was above it.
So let's see.
Above.
Ahuva Yachai, I'm reading from Tanya, Yigeres HaKodesh. My brethren, my friends, from my great troubles that have surrounded me, like water each day and night, I'm unable to write in length, but let me write these few things. I am repeating what I've already written originally, especially to those who have given themselves over to daven, with service of the heart, in a loud voice. So they should strengthen themselves to not be intimidated by any opposition inside or outside, but they should daven aloud. That's one letter in Tanya. We then have another letter of the Alter Rebbe. I am reminding you, this is printed in Yigeres HaKodesh, Igros Kodesh of the Alter Rebbe, Chelik Aleph, Volume 1. I am reminding you of the takanas, the institutions that we already made, that every single person in the minyan should have a set day that he davens for the Amud, and on him is the responsibility to gather 10 people around him who will daven bekel out loud together from the beginning of Hayd until after Shemoneh Esrei.
Out loud, Shemoneh Esrei?
Yeah. Out loud until Shemoneh Esrei. Well, the out loud is not going to Shemoneh Esrei. That's for sure. There is meaning unition. In another letter, although the dialect, the nusach, the wording of davening and the amount of times we pray each day, 3 times, is rabbinical, Ikar Inyana, its main purpose, its root and essence, is Yesod Kol HaTorah, is the foundation of the whole Torah. L'das Hashem, to know God. L'hakir Gadol v'Sifarto, to know His greatness and glory with a complete mind. To love Hashem, to attach to Him and to His Torah, to desire His mitzvahs. And this is all done through davening ba'aveda, through saying Psukei D'Zimra and the blessings of Krishma before and afterwards, with a full mouth and with a loud voice that arouses the heart. And if we do this, perhaps we'll be successful. Another letter, this time from the Mikveh Rebbe. I am mentioning to you another evil rumor that came to my ears from the sages and those who understand Chassidus. Sherabim chalolim hipila v'atzum kol haregel v'asher ze pri chachmas and sal b'chinas eish shel. That they have written to me in complaint against those Chassidim who daven out loud, and their complaint has caused much damage. They are making fun of these Pashat Balabatim who are davening b'tmimus according to their level, and they want to become close to God, and therefore they're davening with a loud voice, specifically in order to arouse the heart. And these Chassidim who think that they know Chassidus are making fun of them and belittling them, and it's a shame that they're using their wisdom of Chassidus to turn bittul into yesh. This is according to the Mikveh Rebbe. Quite forceful.
Yeah.
And I know that there's a number of different natures of people amongst the Chassidim that even though they have knowledge of Dach, of Divrei L'Kimchaim of Chassidus, they're not able to properly concentrate without raising their voice. In the davening, just like in learning Gemara. And therefore, what they're doing is a good thing. Then he continues, and therefore furthermore, even those who do have in-depth knowledge of Chassidus, and they contemplate it before davening, they also say Psukei D'Zimra, specifically B'Kol Ram, in a loud voice. And the Mikveh Rebbe repeats this again and again in many letters printed in Igros Kodesh Chelik Aleph.
You can understand how they got to that conclusion, because actually listen, like people that down with their own voice, so that is so.
Or they've davened away.
And that's referring specifically to Shemana Esrei. That halacha is specifically to Shemana Esrei. As only in Shemana Esrei, let's understand the difference. Shemana Esrei is where you're speaking directly to God and making requests to daven out loud.
Yeah.
Even Shemana Esrei for the Chassidim don't know about what. Well, it's written in the Shulchan Aruch that for concentration, even Shemana Esrei, but that's referring to Shemana Esrei. Until Shemana Esrei, you can daven in a loud voice, and people can't tell you to be quiet. It's only in Shemana Esrei. But according to what we're hearing here from the Rabbi, is that you're supposed to daven aloud, as davening aloud helps with the concentration. It helps arouse. In other words, that we receive here a very simple, doable tip in how to raise the level of kavana, of concentration in davening. A very simple, doable tip. You're anyways davening, you're anyways saying the words. Just do it loudly. When you daven out loud, it helps you concentrate. It helps you focus on the words. It disturbs the machshava zaros. That's a fact. When you daven low, it allows the mind to do its own thing. So your mouth does one thing, and your mind does another thing. When you daven out loud, the Yetzer Hara doesn't have as easy of a time thinking of machshava zaros. Sometimes you have to stop and think about it, and then continue davening. But you can't do it together. What is hidden in the voice or in saying words aloud that has this special connection with the soul, with the heart, that it helps bring concentration? So we're going to read now a number of pages from Sefer HaMaimorim Ranat. This was a mimer of the Rebbe, written in the year Tafresh Nun Tes, which was 1899. It was actually 1898, by Rosh Hashanah. And he gives us a fascinating insight into the power that's found within our voice, within our sound, within words. Before learning this, a person, all he knows is that speech is for other people. Speech is a tool for how other people can understand what I want to express to them, what I want to tell them, what I want to ask from them. It's a tool for other people. It's there to use when you need other people, similar to a name. Would you need a name if no one else was around? What do you need a name for? Right? You had Chava. You had the animals. You had God. Adam wasn't alone. I understand, but Hashem is necessary because you have other people. If you were alone, what would you need a name for? Would you ever use it? Let's talk from a halachic perspective. What makes you halachically, what halachically gives you a name? When is a name, according to halacha, considered a name? From Aliyah L'Torah, for being used, for a get, for a ksuba. When is a name, according to halacha, a name? Do you know? When people have called you that name for 30 days. When people have called you that name for 30 days. So if you were growing up in a lone island, you don't have a name, and you decided, I want to give myself a name. Who are those people who are going to call you that name for 30 days?
My name is not entirely mine, because I got it from my grandmother. So she was called Sarah Kligman, and my name is Sarah Kligman. I smile a lot when I see her picture in my house, and I think she was dark hair, so she looked very different from me, and I smile a lot because I see Sarah Kligman, and I am Sarah Kligman, but it's alone.
It still is your name. You share the same name. But it's also explained. It's explained in the Sfarim that when you call a name after a certain individual in the family, spiritually, b'hashgacha pratis, it's because it's revealed before God that there's a special Gilgal connection between that individual and that person. Either a Gilgal or an Itzitz, there's a spiritual connection between the two. That's why the Rabbi emphasized and encouraged people to call their children after the names of the Rabbi. As when you call, for example, Yosef Yitzchak, when a person calls his son the name Yosef Yitzchak, it gives him a spiritual connection with the Rebbe Rayatz, the Rebbe Yosef Yitzchak. So in this mimer,
of course, if I'm named after my grandmother, the connection is there.
I'm talking about I'm talking about a spiritual neshama connection.
And is there?
Yeah, that's what we just said.
My grandmother and myself.
I mean, usually in the family there is, but when you're named after someone, it's a stronger connection. So we're going to read through this mimer, and it's going to give us a tremendous insight into how speech is something that we can use for ourselves, independent of other people. We don't have to wait for other people to be around to start talking. We can start talking to ourselves. However, as I emphasized in Halacha and the Shulchan Aruch, not in public. Although today, the truth is, you have people today with those Bluetooths, and sometimes I think they're crazy. You know, you see people having a whole conversation to themselves, then you realize when you come up close, they have a Bluetooth in their ear. So today, maybe it's more acceptable. You can have a conversation with yourself in public. People just think you're wearing a Bluetooth.
Exactly. I get away with it without having.
I actually once used this.
And I'm not like that.
I was once on a bus. I was once in a bus on a very long journey for a few hours, and someone who I knew was sitting next to me, and it was something I wanted to share with him. I'm learning, but I know he wasn't open to learning it. In Chassidus, now I'm about the chair. So I got on my phone and I made believe I was having a conversation with someone for about a half hour, and I knew he was listening to every single word I was saying. And afterwards, he started asking me questions. By the way, I'm sorry, but I couldn't bear hearing. And then, that's what Aaron Akain did to Bin Shalom Bayis, right? He would say, I spoke to him, and he's okay with it. Anyways, okay, let's read through. I think the words speak for themselves. Let's begin. Hamalchus nikra kais. The sphere of Malchus, the attribute of Malchus of Atzilus, is called a cup. The kamoisha kais of klila kabel v'seichayayin. Just like a cup is a receptacle, a vessel which receives water. So to the level of Malchus receives within it all the revelations. Notice he's explaining here that the sphere of Malchus is the sphere that basically carries and holds all of the revelations of the previous spheres. So while Chachma has its own independent advantage, entity, attribute, Bin has its own independent attribute, and Chesed and Gvura, they all have something unique to themselves. The uniqueness of Malchus is not anything of its own that it has, but the fact that it collects from each of the ones above it. It collects each of the 9 spheres above it. So it's not anything independent, but it's something of unifying everything that it received from everybody else. That's why it's called a cup, as it receives. This is very similar to speech, hadibur. Speech is a vessel into which we invest soul powers into. Intellect and emotion. Meaning, let me just explain what that means, right? So the letters of speech, language, when we speak, we are coming to, it's a tool to express an intellectual matter or an emotional matter or feeling. So it doesn't have anything of its own, any meaning of its own. Otherwise, it's just gibberish, right? When you say gibberish, what meaning does that have? What worth does it have? Nothing. The whole worth of speech is that it's coming to express an idea or coming to express a feeling. Similar to Malchus, it has nothing of its own independency. It's just receiving from everyone else. It receives the influence from all the 10 spheres. So we find similarly the Jewish people, the general collection of souls of the Jewish people is called Knesset Yisrael, from the wording of Knesses, gathering, as it incorporates within it all the revelations of the sublime lights of Yisrael, the El of the supernal Israel. Due to this reason, the sphere of Malchus is called a cup.
What?
A cup.
A cup?
Okay.
Got it.
This is Malchus, and what I'm drinking is all the 10 spheres. Now we know that Yehuda, let's go back to what we began the class with, Yehuda and Yosef. Yehuda is Malchus, and Yosef is Zah. Yosef represents all those spheres, Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes, Tzimeach. So we're saying that Yehuda is really, which is Malchus, has nothing of his own. He just receives from everyone else. While Yosef is representing all those 6 independent spheres that have their own entity, their own individual, unique advantages over each other. The Alter Rebbe then goes into explaining this also regarding a relationship between man and woman. Men are like Yosef, Zah. Women are like Yehuda, Malchus. Regarding bringing a child into the world, Rabbi Shab says, The Alter is now beginning to explain how Malchus, even though on the one hand only receives from everyone on top of him, on the other hand it contains a certain advantage over everybody else.
Of course.
The father provides the seed, but that seed is not able to develop if it's not embraced within the womb of the woman. Shalzeh Amru, on this it says, Bina Yisera Nisna Be'isha. A woman was given extra understanding, Yisra Be'ish, more than a man. Don't take this personally, anyone. Don't use this against me. The Hainu.
You know
So
the
far it's
danger.
good.
You know the danger.
The Hainu. Shabbat Dafka Nitan HaKoyach Hazeh. Specifically Malchus, or this mashal, the woman was given the power to develop this into a child. She is Habas Avad, Binyan Shoy, Machamesh Sagidim. Chalakech Znav Shesech Lamidus. Mashlinkin is a bishop. This power is not given to a man. The Mayai says, although in the tipa and the seed is included the entire power of birth of the child, the potential of the child, nonetheless, it's not able to push its way into an actual existence. That's only through Nukva, through Malchus. So basically what we learn from this so far is that although it's true that Malchus is just the tool, nonetheless, it's the tool that is able to then cook and bake those spheres to become useful, to become advantageous. So when we say that Malchus has nothing unique of its own, it doesn't mean that Malchus is a doormat. Malchus is nothing. It's just where you throw all the spheres into. It's just the vessel that holds everything. I don't know. Malchus doesn't have anything unique of its own because its uniqueness is the fact that it's able to take from everyone else and develop the aspects that everyone else has to a much greater level. And now the Rebbe Rashab connects this with speech. We find this likewise regarding speech. Speech, although as we said before, is the receiver of our emotions, the receiver of our thoughts, of our intellect. It also contains a power that's much higher than intellect and emotions. As although everything we express in speech comes from the mind and emotion, such as when a person is giving over an intellectual matter, he is then investing that intellect into the words of speech. When he's speaking a feeling of love, he's expressing his feelings of love, or Vayigash, or anger. The letters of speech that he is expressing is now the recipient of those emotions of Chesed and Gvura. And the way it works. One second. Just lost it. And the way it works is that the speech first receives, it's first a recipient from the seichel and the midas, from the intellect and emotion. In other words, that the way it works is that at first the emotion or intellect first goes into the thought process, and from the thought it's fed to the mouth, the person expresses it. And ends up that in our thought we have a much greater expression of the light, of the revelation of the emotion and of the revelation of the intellect than we do in speech. In other words, our thoughts have ability to hold a lot more of that emotion and of that idea, intellectual idea, than we can actually express. So the idea is that speech is really receiving only the final touches, only a very contracted form of the thought over the emotion. So it's a recipient that doesn't even receive everything. Nonetheless, Nonetheless, speech has an advantage over thought and has an advantage even over the emotion or the intellect itself. How? What is its advantage? Now we're going to begin to explain. We readily see that when a person begins taking that contracted revelation, glare of the emotion that he wants to express or the intellect he wants to express, and he actually does so and places it into words, we see that he then receives insight into the matter much greater than he had beforehand. Expressing one's thoughts, one's feelings, one's intellectual ideas into words helps widen the emotion, helps widen the breadth of the understanding and comprehension of that matter, even greater than the letters of thought. When a person begins, let's say it's an intellectual matter, and a person begins expressing it in speech, he's then able to think of new ideas and new details of that idea. With a sefes or chadash, with a much greater additional new light. The amkas haseichel, of the depths of his intellect, what he wasn't able to have previously in his thought process. In other words, when we have an idea of something and we just leave it in the thoughts, which is what we usually do, that is our status quo. We never express unless we're talking to someone. We otherwise leave it in our minds. Then we are basically limiting it from having this tool of expansion, which is done through speech.
Does it have to be heard?
By you?
No, by me. If I'm not deaf, I am going to listen to myself. But
by somebody else, you're asking?
Heard.
You're asking by somebody else?
Yes.
I mean, having someone else listen definitely helps, That's without question, and that's why we have therapists, and that's why we have chavrusas. A chavrusa is basically an intellectual therapist. A chavrusa is a partner you learn with. He's basically your therapist in intellect. Your therapist in emotion is what therapists are today. They help you express yourself, and just the expressing yourself is already half the cure. Am I correct?
Correct.
Thank you. I got the S coming. Just the expression. Think about it. If you don't go to a therapist, you're kind of crippled in who you can express yourself to and what you can open yourself up to. You're scared, you're intimidated, and just that alone, that you have no one to talk to, is already part of the problem. Just the fact that you have an ish, the aga believe ish sichana, that you have the ish sichana, you have the person you can talk over with, it's already half the cure. I mean, that's what they always say, that they teach men. Just listen, right? Just listen to the wife. It's not about just listen. The solution will happen by just listening.
Don't fix it.
Yeah, don't fix it. Just listen.
They bring a lot of money.
כשבן אדם רוצה להגיד משהו, אז הוא צריך לנסח את זה. ואז הוא עם עצמו צריך לערוך את זה, לסדר את זה, להסביר את המחשב.
Right. So what you're saying, I think if I understood correctly what you're saying, is there's really two things here. One thing here we're discussing in the Rebbe Rashab, and that is that speech, the words of speech, has a special power. We still have not disclosed why it has this power, but we do see it has this power. That when we express things in speech, it's able to dig in deeper to our intellect. Or right now we're still focusing on intellect. We're going to eventually go also into emotion. It begins to dig deeper into that feeling. As I said before, what is Malchus doing? It highlights chesed, it highlights gevura, it highlights chachma. It begins highlighting and building the expression. It basically booms up all of the individual spheres. So that's alone just with expressing. Now, expressing it to another person has the additional advantage that you rethink what you're saying, you think about it twice, you start seeing things from a different perspective. So I think, is that what you're trying to say? Yeah. So that's an addition to what we're saying. That's an additional mile, additional advantage. When you speak to somebody else, you begin rethinking things. But just the fact that you're speaking, even if it's not to somebody else, already gives a person the ability to tap into a much deeper part of his intellect.
Speaking to someone, not only do we hear ourselves, we also get from the Yehuda, it's a transformance, a feedback or reflection. Even if we're off, we can adjust ourselves and have the Yehuda also put couple cents in.
Right. So that's why I said before. So the Chavrusa is like the intellectual therapist. So he can help guide and he can help give other perspectives and cover areas that you forgot to cover. But that's all in addition to what we're discussing. Here we're emphasizing even when you're not with the Chavrusa. It's just you and yourself together, saying and expressing words aloud assists one in being able to dig deeper into that. Now, this, of course, can be used both ways. It can be used for good, can be used for bad. I am so angry at this individual. I am so angry. Do you know what he did to me? So that itself already begins building the anger.
I thought
he wasn't so angry before he started saying it.
It doesn't empty it?
No.
By saying it?
No.
It depends, if the person then goes and confronts the individual and curses him out with, 4-letter curse words for 10 minutes, and he feels, wow, I feel so much better. Yes, that is true. But that's only because he used a weapon to attack that person. Let's continue.
This is the best listening is the mirror listening, which means the person, if I am the person who listens, I just made the other person aware that I'm listening, no feedback. So to let the person just expand.
Meaning when a person contemplated this matter in his mind first, before he expressed it in speech, he did not at all think about it in his mind, these new depths that he has come to, as now he is doing. So I'll give a little interesting confession of personally how I use these lines that we just said in my work. I do not put up an article until first I do an audio on it. And the reason is very simple. When I first started this, many, many years ago, I realized that when I was putting up articles and did audios later on, I had so many new points that I would suddenly get in my mind when I did an audio on it. And I'm not talking to anybody. I'm talking to a computer. I'm recording myself. And so here we see a clear experiment of what we're saying here, that just literally saying over the idea that you already know adds in more points and more ideas that you wouldn't be able to know with just thinking. That also has to do with mashke. And because of this, remember what you brought up, I said we're going to get to it. Because of this, the halacha is that learning Torah must specifically be with speech. As it says, v'dibarta bam. It's not enough just to think Torah in your mind. You have to express it to fulfill the mitzvah. The Torah is life to those who express it with their mouth. The Bulam days halacha b'dibar is when a person learns a certain halacha in actual speech. Only then will he be able to reach the depths of the intellect and understanding of that halacha, which would not have been novelized to him at all if he would have just left it in his mind. And so too, when a person expresses with speech, the matter in speech, he's able to then be open to other approaches of understanding it.
I often when I eat breakfast, I read some different Torah. So what? But I'm eating, so not saying there's any value to that.
Of course, there's value. No one's saying that thinking Torah is an avera. No one's saying that thinking Torah is not good. We're just saying it's not the ultimate. So obviously, when a person is unable to use his mouth to express the words of Torah, then he's not able to. And it's still good to think of Torah in your mind. But, there are certain areas, according to halacha, you're not allowed to say words of Torah, but you're allowed to think them. And such as in a bathhouse, you're not allowed to say words of Torah there, but you're allowed to think words of Torah in certain areas of the bathhouse, as in the Gemara and the Shulchan Aruch. So obviously there's an advantage there, but it's not the same advantage of actually saying the words. The point is that, the Yetzer Hara is always trying to get out an easy life. So even when a person learns Torah, he says, why do you have to learn Torah so seriously? Lay down on the couch, put your feet down, open up a book, get yourself a nice cup of coffee, cup of iced tea, and enjoy. And you read it like you read a novel. See how to look at colleges and how people learn in universities. No kedusha. They have the book open, they're reading, they're silent, they don't say a word, they don't open their mouth. Everyone's like this. That's how you read a newspaper article, that's how you study math, science. But the truth is, in Torah, it has to be with all of your powers. It has to be with all your koiches. And that's why it's brought down that, first of all, we're learning here that when you're learning Torah without expressing the words, your full mind is not involved. You have a tool called speech, which is able to dig into the intellect of understanding this matter. And when a person is just thinking it and not reading it and not saying it, he's not using that tool. And the mitzvah of Talmud Torah is to use that tool. Now, often, it's not enough just to read the words. That's also a good start, to actually read the words. But to rephrase them in your own words, that's when it begins getting tricky. The easy Torah learning is when you just you take no responsibility, you just read what it says, you move on. When you actually have to then express it and explain it, then suddenly you begin understanding. Suddenly you begin, you force yourself into understanding and really what you're saying. The Rebbe Rashab now begins explaining why this is the case, and he says the following. In other words, why is it that speech, expressing words of Torah or words of anything, helps to then widen the breadth of your understanding in the subject? He says the following. Every single individual contains what's called koyach hamaskil. Koyach hamaskil, I don't know if it's been discovered yet in psychology. We'll give them some more years. It's koyach hamaskil is basically the undisclosed potential intellectual capability of the brain. As we know, according to science, all humans only use a certain very minimal percentage of our brain, some less, some more. The common denominator is that we're all under the 90%. We're not really using a lot of our brain. We're using very little of our brain. So in Chassidus is explained that the brain, and which is just, by the way, a vessel, but its corresponding Chabad, Chochma Bina Das, contains what's called koyach hamaskil, which is a very high, sublime, and deep level of intellect, of understanding, that's very minimally expressed. So whenever we're thinking intellectually, we are having little drops of rain fall from our koyach hamaskil to our conscious mind. I'll just give an example. It happens all the time. We're thinking about a problem, and all of a sudden a solution comes. Where did that solution come from? How did that solution happen? How did you think of the solution before you thought of it? Ever think about that? It's a crazy question when you think about it. Yeah, where did it come from? Hashem sent it through the messenger. Who's the messenger? Oh, Koyach HaMaskil. Koyach HaMaskil is the brain behind the brain. But it doesn't send a lot. It sends little drops. The more you work on it, the more you exercise the brain, the more drops it sends. But Hashem blessed us with a tool that's able to have a open line communication with Koyach HaMaskil, and that's called speech. When a person talks, when a person expresses in speech, he's in essence opening up his Koyach HaMaskil to throw out a lot more light onto the subject. He's exercising his intellectual capability a lot deeper than he regularly is able to do. As regularly without speech, all intellect that's drawn from its source in the Koyach HaMaskil only is revealed in a small amount. And when a person goes ahead and expresses it in speech, he forces the Koyach of the Chachma to reveal itself more and more than what it was able to do on its own. And therefore we see as well regarding emotions. At the same time that we said before, speech is the result, it's the recipient of an emotion, of a feeling. It also then contributes back towards the feeling. As through expressing the words, the person is then able to amplify that feeling even more. And he's able then to become even more excited and more emotional about that matter. This is why we see a lot of people have trouble in expression of their feelings. As on the one hand, to express a feeling is basically you have to contract the feeling and put it into a few words, a few sentences, and that's difficult. It's difficult to squash the unlimited emotion into some tangible, expressible words. So that's one limitation that people have in expressing emotion. The other limitation in here we're saying is something much deeper. I'm happy where I am. I don't want this to become explosive. Speech has the ability to take this to a much higher and deeper level. The same way we said regarding Ava, regarding love, so too it is regarding Gvurim, regarding anger. Through speech, a person is able to increase and amplify the anger that he has or the upsetness that he has. Therefore, the Reishis Chachma writes, school of the Midas Hakas, that a school of against anger is that at the time of the anger, don't talk, don't say anything. Or another area it says, speak very softly. Speak very softly. Why are you raising your voice? Because you're angry and you want to release the anger. But by doing so, you're amplifying the anger. So as I said, one feeds the other. When a person doesn't speak, it helps the anger calm down. When he doesn't speak, meaning he doesn't express the anger in a state of anger, what does he do?
So then he isn't good.
Well, let's make this clear. We're not saying that the person should never bring this up in his life. We're saying he should wait to bring it up when he's no longer angry. Because if you're going to bring it up when you're angry, no matter how much your mind is telling you, be gentle, be controlled. The minute that mouth starts talking, it goes out. It begins, like it's like an uncontrollable machine gun. And
But you think that later on expressing the words doesn't bring back the anger?
it may, but right now the difference is that right now the emotion is what's an eruption, and the speech is a recipient of that emotion. When you bring it up later on for whatever necessary purpose that it's necessary to bring it up, then the emotion is then the recipient of the speech. It's at least it's not a two-way street that the emotion feeds the speech, and then the speech feeds back the emotion, and you have an explosion.
Your expression, speak softly and carry a big stick. Kill it with kindness.
So it is regarding all character traits, all emotions. When we don't express them, they lower themselves, they become smaller. The excitement, to the point that they completely disappear. And on the contrary, when a person speaks about it and expresses it, they are able to become that much greater. I'll tell you what we just read is the entire secret behind what is known in society for so many generations, decades, and centuries, millenniums, the idea of poems. Poems. Ever think about it? Why on earth would anyone care about a poem? Why are there universities who have poem literature classes? Who cares? Who cares? Why are poems such a big deal? Big deal of a big deal they make of Jewish poets. So how to make a few fancy riddles, a few fancy words together rhymes. What is that? What's the chachma there? It's not true. Poems are a powerful way of expression that are basically people that are poets, people that are real poets. They have a skill in that they know in the words, those potent, to be able to express the emotion in, to then go back and feed back to the emotion. And that's why poems are so powerful. We shouldn't take it lightly.
That's what I was going to ask you about that. As I'm writing what you're saying, so my mind is also like totally expanding. And I wanted to ask you, like between the thoughts and the speech, the writing has like also an amazing power.
Right. So I wanted to speak about that as well. It's not discussed here in this minor, but when I first learned this minor many, many years ago in the yeshiva here in Tzfas, about 20 years back, I asked the mashpia then the same question you asked me, and he agreed that it's correct. And it is true. We see it for ourselves that writing has a power as well as speech, but it's not the same power. Speech, expressing words, saying the physical words, has a certain power that's not contained in writing, but writing as well. Writing is basically an exercise of the brain, and therefore it helps squeeze out more information, and it's basically a harder way of forcing you to get it. But as I'm saying, as I know in my own work, writing does not accomplish that tapping into the kayach hamaskil as does speech. As I see, I can write something up, and then when I come to say it over, how did I miss this? How did I not see this? It's unbelievable.
Sleep, that's also.
Does what?
Sleep.
Yeah, I know.
To go
Yeah. Going to sleep does.
Brings a solution to problems.
You wake up with a new start. You have a fresh start. Yeah, you have a fresh start. It's like a computer. The computer isn't working well. It's giving you problems. Put it down. Shut it down and put it back on. You go to sleep 100%. That's why we say sleep over it tonight. You wake up with a fresh mind, a fresh perspective. Okay. And so too regarding davening. The main thing is this expression of the davening and words and letters of davening. In other words, you arouse kavanah and then express that concentration, that feeling with your mouth. And then you're able to cause that in the speech itself, you feel the emotion of the intent more than in your mind, more than if it would have stayed there alone. And we see this visually in davening, when a person then expresses and says the words of davening out loud. It helps him concentrate and it helps arouse the emotions a lot more. Now, what's the reason behind all this? So we went a little deeper. We said that speech, we see, has a certain advantage, that it's able to tap into the koyach hamaskil. Why is it able to tap into the koyach hamaskil? How does that work? We're working ourselves a little deeper. We gave it one level of scientific explanation. It's tapping in from that subconscious reservoir of intellect that we normally get only a few drops from. But why is it able to do that? Why does speech have that power? What is speech? It's just made up words. Let's not talk about Lashon HaKodesh English. All it is an agreed upon form of expression. That's all it is. Right, but
it's a process. It's a process of self-reflection, and as you mentioned before, it makes space for some more room for more development. It's an ongoing process, and it empowers oneself for more, and it develops different ideas. It's a process. My feelings were hurt this morning, and hour by hour, I gave it the thought, and from hurtful or madness or being angry, I went to Rachmunis, understanding the other person's position and feeling very pitiful about them. And all my anger went away. It's a process.
So you're describing a beautiful thing. However, our question here is, how do words, letters, voice, expression have ability? Why does it have that special relationship to be able to start drawing down from Koyach HaMaskil? Who gave it this protection? So the Rebbe Rashab now tells us something amazing, something unbelievable. He says the following. To introduce, as an introduction to the idea he's going to explain, let me ask the following question. Who taught us how to speak? Our parents. So our parents actually never taught us how to speak. They just spoke. They never taught us how to speak. Who taught us how to move our lips? Let's be intellectual. Let's think about this. It makes absolutely no sense that automatically and naturally we should be able to do one of the most difficult things. Have you ever met a musician that just woke up one day and was able to compose Beethoven and Mozart? No lessons, no training. He just listened to the music a lot. He grabs a guitar, grabs a piano, and is able to do it. Impossible. He has to sit there, take lessons in music, know which buttons express which sound, how to put the sounds together, and then he can develop his skill and become a Mozart or a Beethoven. But no Beethoven was born overnight. Just one day begins to make music. So how does a human being suddenly start talking when nobody taught him? By the way, when you want to say the T, you have to put your teeth like this, and you have to move your lip like that, and you have to put your mouth in this position. Anyone who works in speech therapy knows speech is a very complex matter.
Is anything like that in babies developing?
Well, we're targeting speech right now.
It's the same problem as anything else.
We are targeting right now speech. As I say in Judaism, adding to the question with another question doesn't remove the right of my question. So the Rebbe Rashab gives us an insight into what's going on. Something that people who don't learn Chassidus don't have access to, and we're getting access to this insight. This insight is really already written in Tanya by the Alter Rebbe, and that is that one of the essential novelties of the human spirit, of the human soul, is the idea of expression, speech expression. It's not something that it's a tool that you learn. It's not something that you pick up as you move on, but it's an essential part of the soul. In other words, the same way we have the souls of animals, meaning cows, donkeys, etc., and they have a certain common denominator amongst those souls, a certain uniqueness that's found by animals, and all vegetation has have a certain uniqueness. So too, all human souls contain a certain uniqueness of the power of expression. It's not an added power of chachma. It's not part of kadmas haseichel or koyach hamaskil. It's embedded within the very essence of the human psyche. And that's why take any child on earth and bring him up in any area in the world of any language of domination, he will learn that language. The idea of expression is something that's automatically embedded within the essence of the neshama. Let me just finish this thought. And because of that, it's not that the words of speech that we say have ability to drive up all the way to Katmas HaSeichel, knock on its door, and say, listen, we're buddies. Send me some information. Send me more notes on this matter. Open up my emotions more. He's higher than Koyach HaMaskil. He's above Koyach HaMaskil. He comes from the essence of the soul. Speech. Expression of speech is rooted in the essence of the soul. The expression of letters, of words, is rooted in the essence of the soul. And that's why the Alter Rebbe explains a baby, a child, can just begin talking. He doesn't need to be taught how to move each part of his mouth.
Because a baby starts to open sounds, and those sounds which have make sense to the language that they speak, they're trained to reinforce. Some sounds.
What do you mean the parents reinforce?
Yeah.
I have 10 children. I can attest, we have never educated our children how to speak. Huh? Okay, 100%. We agree that in order to know how to express that power of expression in an organized language, you need to hear the language from others. 100%. We're not arguing that. We agree that if you are left in a room by yourself and you're brought up or amongst animals, as they did a case study on an individual who was not purposely, of course, but the situation was that they were brought up amongst animals, and they expressed themselves in animal language, whatever that means, and they weren't able to talk, but they nonetheless they adapted to the talk of the dogs that they were brought up with. The point is that obviously it needs to have, and by the way, this is now, but back in the day, it's explained till Dar HaFlaga, people were born speaking Hebrew. Like you can say, hey, how was it in the womb, by the way? Baby was just born. How'd you like it? Was it warm? Were you cold? And they'll answer you. And Moshe HaKodesh, they were born with this ability. When Hashem, it's brought down the Medrash, when Hashem caused the Dar HaFlaga to happen, he removed this ability. He forced people to start learning from their parents.
When was that?
Dar HaFlaga was about 4,000 years ago. 35. So the Tower of Babel, the Tower of Babylon, that famous tower. So God made it be a little more difficult. He then spread everyone everywhere. How do you have Indians? How do you have people, indigenous nation people living in these islands that no man has ever touched? How did they get there? Look, they had modern ships. How did they end up there with their makeshift Stone Age rafts that will drown with a little? God flipped people places. So Dar HaFlaga. So it's brought down. A few people to the United States, a few people to the Amazons, and some of these people are still there till today. Well, that's my expression, but you know what I mean. He arranged that they would end up there. There's a small island right next to India of people that haven't been contacted historically ever. People that have no contact with the outside world. We don't know how they got there. We don't know where they're from. They don't know that we exist. We know that they exist, but they don't know anything of the outside world.
They don't let you near.
Correct. I mean, that's usually how it works. They're very worried. But And Hashem therefore then made it, once there is 70 languages, then you can't be born speaking 70 languages. That's very confusing. So you now have to learn. But back then, people were born speaking Lashon HaKodesh. This was a part of the human psyche. And this is really not a chiddush of Chassidus. It's written in the Rambam already. The Rambam explains that the nefesh of the human over the animals, that it's a nefesh hamidaberis, a speaking soul. Everything about that. Why did the early philosophers describe the soul of the Jew or the soul of the human as the speaking soul? Do they ever describe it as the loving soul, the wise soul, the angry soul? Speech is just another, it's on the bottom of the list, a lavush, it's a garment. No, it's not. It's part of the essential makeup of the soul. And because of this, it has a power that's not found in anything else, in which it's able to reveal and express insights of knowledge and insights of emotion that we wouldn't have otherwise. What's that?
So it's all content.
Right, yeah. ובדרך כלל, שורש ומקור האיסיס הוא מבחינת עצמוס הנפש אינה מבחינת כוח השכל. In general, the root and source of letters of speech comes from the essence of the soul that's above the power of intellect. And this is why you can place any dog you want or any animal you want, bring them day one in any home of any language, they won't learn any language. They will never learn to express. Take any human, bring them up in any area, they will learn the language. It's an essential difference of the makeup of the soul. How long does the conversation go? Why do you think they make such a big deal when the parrot says, how was your day? How was your day? Why are they making such a big deal? It says has this whole Megillah, because it can't say whole Megillah. It'll say, how was your day? 1,000,000 times. Well, a parrot can repeat a little bit, but it's not anything of, you can't compare it.
What did you say? Did you say anything about those, these people that were isolated? What did you want
I was
to
just
say?
bringing up the point that Hashem placed people in different areas, starting from Dara Flaga, and that's how they ended up there, even though we have no way of understanding how they ended up in these areas, and that's when the new speech started. Okay.
יש אמרה שעדר ג'ירפות, כשג'ירפה אחת מזיזה את האוזן, כל הג'ירפות מבינות מה היא רוצה להגיד. אבל כשבן אדם מדבר, אף אחד לא מבין למה הוא התכוון. ברוב תבניות, too many options of phrasing, and when you say one word, what did you mean? What did you put in it?
That's because people were very, very self-absorbed. We're naturally self-absorbed, and we naturally receive people's expressions in a very calculated way, how it relates to us. And
Drafts aren't absorbed.
Correct.
הטבע של האגואיסט, הוא חושב שהכל מכוון רק עליו. הוא לא פתוח.
We're more sensitive. Call a giraffe an idiot, tell him you're so tall, I can't, make fun of him. You won't care less. Tell that to a human being, even if he's a midget, he'll take it personally.
בגלל שאנחנו מבינים את זה הכל מנקודת המבט שלנו. ולא מנקודת מבט של האחר.
Okay, Ad Kan from the Rebbe Rashab, but we're going to close up. We have also a mime of the Nitla Rebbe. I'll save us the reading from it because it's about 150 pages.
Let's say that.
But the gist of the idea I wanted to bring from there is that the Nitla Rebbe explains there a little deeper. He goes through the same ideas basically we've already said in this mime of the Rebbe Rashab. The power of speech, the fact that it's rooted in above Koyach HaMaskil, it's rooted in Etzma Nefesh. But then also explains it on the opposite side. This was explaining it from the positive side, and the Rebbe explains it more of the negative side. Because speech, the words of expression, and here it's both in the mind and in the mouth, because also in our minds, we think in a language. If we didn't know a language, we wouldn't be able to think properly. Think about that. Even if we can't talk, if we know a language, we can at least think ideas in our mind. We can express to ourselves an emotion in our mind, not just have a feeling. But if we don't have a language, we have no letters to fill that into, to express it into, and we're almost stuck. We're like an animal, basically. Where we think in pictures, we're not able to think in words. So he says like this. So the power of speech, of letters, is both in speech and also in thought. And because of this, Mittler Rebbe, yeah, it's in Shari Eira, book of Hanukkah and Purim. We just finished learning it over Hanukkah. Shari Eira. So in Shari Eira, he explains the following: that because of this, we can understand why it says that machshava and dibur are kashe megufa shel aveira. Thinking of an aveira and expressing an aveira in speech is worse than the aveira itself. How is it possible?
Wow.
On the one hand, that's a Gemara. That's a known thing. That's not the mitzvah. But he's explaining it now based on what we know. In the physical world, what affects more the physical world is obviously the action. But what impurifies more the soul, what reaches deeper into the soul, is the thought and the speech. As before, it's an expression of the soul itself. And therefore he writes that Gilgulim have the ability to be mataken, to fix a person's mistakes of action. A person did action mistakes, did aveirus, sinned in activity. Sinful activity, Gilgulim and Gehenim and other things are able to purify that. However, machshava and dibur, that are forbidden speech and forbidden thought, it surrounds the soul, it encompasses the soul, and the soul isn't freed from it until it goes through what's called kaf hakela. Kaf hakela.
Sling.
Kaf hakela is, in very simple terms, it is in Ivrit. In very simple terms, kaf hakela is the soul. Kaf hakela is as follows.
Kele is prison.
Kaf hakela means that the soul re-experiences what it did. In this case, we're saying re-experiences what it thought and what it spoke. And this time it's in the world of truth. It's in the world of truth. It knows the truth. It sees the divine light.
Pretty painful.
It's very painful. It's the most painful thing in the world. We experience kaf hakela sometimes in our lives. I'll explain to you how. Imagine if we got upset with somebody, and I'll just give a wild example. Somebody did something and we got very upset at them, and on a public forum of 100 people, we really smashed them to smithereens. We blasted them and shamed them. And then we calmed down. First, we were very calm afterwards, right? We were excited. We released, right? We released our tension, released our anger. It was amazing. Better than going to a therapist. It got rid of that feeling right away. And then we begin thinking, a day passes, we begin, oh my gosh, what did I do? What did I do? And feel and a panging feeling of remorse and sickening feeling of regretfulness. There's no worse feeling than that. What's a greater punishment for a person who we had unfortunately experienced over, I think it was election day, where there was an individual who caused an accident in which an entire family, died. The greatest punishment that man can have, he's getting every moment. That feeling of guilt, he's getting every moment. That feeling of guilt is something you can't pass on with, you can't move on with. It hangs on to you every day of your life. And that's what kaf hakela is. Kaf hakela is that it's nothing new. No one's getting whipped for anything. You basically re-experience what you did just in the world of truth. Now, it doesn't last forever. It's part of a cleansing process, obviously. But the point is that it can't be cleansed in the normal ways. It's because this is something very deep into the soul. And from all this, we can conclude with a few very practical lessons and tools that we can use.
If a person is being abused by, let's say, somebody abused somebody else, that the person who was abused, can forgive completely, and then the other person won't feel that bad, even if it is in the mind, in the thoughts domain.
Is it possible that forgiveness helps 100%? Everyone knows that forgiveness helps bring closure.
She's saying
Both
about
to
the
the-
other person.
Yes,
the
yes.
user.
Forgiveness brings closure to the victim and to the perpetrator. Are you asking from the victim's perspective?
No.
From the
not
perpetrators?
If I am the victim and I want to, the other person, we say that
It brings
right?
closure to both,
Before we-
100%. Of
before we
course
go
it
to
brings.
bed, we say it.
That no,
I
we
don't
say
want
that
to
we're
have enemies.
asking for forgiveness. Oh, you're saying that we forgive other people? Yes.
Yeah, we say, we
Yeah.
do say that.
Hareini Michael, yeah.
Yeah. So if I
yeah.
do that, will the other person not not have
So guilt feeling?
the gut?
You're asking, does it spiritually affect the other person having guilt? I don't know, but let's be honest. With Hareini Michael, it's very easy to say the words Hareini Michael, and it's good, and we should say it, but it only chips away from the feeling. To really be Michael in the heart, is.
But Hashem accepts it.
It has to be a real mechila. A real mechila is in the heart. It's the beginning, as Chassidim we say it, but a real halachic mechila is in the heart. If a person, what it does is as follows. Speech has power, as we already said. When a person has been wronged and he then expresses himself and he says, and he complains about his, the wrong that was done to him, Hashem hears and Hashem can do something about it. If he complains to Hashem takes it out on the person. So the Arizal once chastised a certain pauper for causing one of his students to die, as the pauper was not basically wasn't on the list of the handouts for whatever reason, and they didn't give him anything for Yom Tov or for Shabbos or for the weekday, and he cried to Hashem, and because of that, one of the students who should have done more in taking care of this individual didn't. He passed away because the Arizal said to him that you shouldn't have cried to Hashem. You should have kept it to yourself. Because you cried to Hashem, that's what caused this death. So there's a certain power in our speech, in our complaint, when an injustice has been done. It says it in the Pasuk. This is not Arizal. This is Chumash. It says that Pen Yikra, when the ani then cries to me, or when, for example, it says regarding an employee. If an employer doesn't pay an employee on time, the employee's already, the bank's against him, the grocery store wants to be paid, they're shutting off credit, and this employer is busy delaying pay. When you cry to Hashem, Hashem will take it out on the employer. So when a person says, I forgive, so at least he will not in speech express that. But so long as in his heart he has tension, he has animosity, it's still a problem.
You don't think it's possible to really forgive in your heart?
It is, but it's an avodah. It's an avodah. It's not automatic. It's not fulfilled simply by saying the words Hareini Michael.
No, but I'm not talking about.
I'll tell you the truth. I have a very easy time forgiving everyone who I did not have contact with. I have no problem. Just like I can love people who I don't know. It's really the challenge is to love the people and forgive the people who really have hurt you. That's a challenge. Let's be honest. That's a real challenge. Okay, let's finish up with the lessons here. So first of all, as we clearly came out from here of the greatness of power of speech, we have to learn to utilize it to benefit ourselves, not just when we're speaking to other people. Don't let speech be the tool that only other people benefit from, but let speech be a tool that we benefit personally from, as we already said, whether it be davening out loud, that's Chavos Kavanah we brought from the Alter Rebbe in the Shulchan Aruch and in the letters and Moshe Mitzvah Rebbe, that davening should be done out loud to help with the Kavanah. Learning Torah should be done expressed in speech and out loud, and to speak to oneself the words of Torah, as we know the Rabbi, and so is the minhag of all Gedolei Yisrael. When they learn Torah, they would learn out loud, and they would also learn with a nigun, as a nigun also helps to arouse and inspire the soul. And therefore the Tzemach Tzedek had certain nigunim for different areas of Torah that he would sing song when he was learning. This is all part of helping that everything of his spirit be involved in the learning. And the same thing is with a person that is so that's with learning and intellect where we can use it. But it can also be with Avodas Hashem, when a person has a challenge instead of leaving the challenge in his mind, he can begin expressing it. For example, a person wakes up at 6 o'clock in the morning, and let's just say he doesn't have to go to work for whatever reason. He doesn't have, the way he works on, he's either self-employed, he doesn't have a boss waiting for him at 8, 9 o'clock. So he's basically has to be self-disciplined. So what happens when it's 6 o'clock in the morning in the winter, very cold, and it's raining outside with dark clouds? The Yetzer Hara gets up and he says, listen, it's too cold, you're too tired, you went to sleep late, go back to sleep a little bit. And the Yetzer Hara comes and says, in thought, also go back to sleep. And what quite often happens, the Yetzer Hara wins. The question is, after how long? Right? An hour later, 3 hours later, it takes some time for the Yetzer Hara to win. But if a person would begin already saying something in speech, Moida ani lefanecha, right away, already before the discussion, he cuts it off already with something in speech. And he begins to expressing the arguments. He speaks to himself. He expresses the arguments of why he has to get up. That itself will help him and motivate him to get up, as opposed to when it's just left in his mind. And so this is a way how speech can be used to help motivate and bring progress to our challenges, to overcome them. Certainly when we're talking about midas, emotions, feelings that we want to try to work on and expressing them, saying them over, saying them in words to ourselves or writing them down is a great way to help develop them and help bring them out and help with relationships. And at the same time, if it's something of a negative emotion, we should be very careful not to express it in speech and only express it in speech if necessary at the proper time. The say of the Daily Hamusar Bisol Salanter that he wouldn't chastise his children until 2 weeks passed from the event that he needed to chastise them on. As he said, till 2 weeks there may be still some emotion involved. It wouldn't work. It wouldn't work for a lot of people. 2 weeks later, the kid doesn't know what you're talking about anymore. But in any event, the point is that it's to learn not to bring it to that level, to that powerful, potent ability that's able to arouse. So I hope we've gained a new tool in life, and Eretz Hashem will be able to use it in a good way.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.